Hey all, welcome back to another episode of the Sharinginsights podcast YouTube series. And this is a part 2 with Peter Kring, who took us on another video into his nursery and grafting operation. But in this video, we get to take a look at his fruit forests and some of the things that he does to maintain it. We get into biochar, microorganisms, and other useful things. So kick back, grab a notebook, and let's dive in.
So how do we get all this production without using any chemicals? You know, what we're trying to do is duplicate what's going on in the forest where everything's growing great. I go and do consultations at farms sometimes, and the workers will say, well, we have to use fertilizers because nothing grows good here. And I turn around and say, well, what about the forest there? How's all that stuff growing? Oh, that's natural. That's natural. That's why that's growing there. I said, that's right. That's what we're going to do. So we bring out lots of, we concentrate mulch under the trees. You can see there's old logs here and lots of leaves. When we do pruning, we chop this stuff up. We prune, and the leaves and small twigs and the big logs we leave on the ground. The rest of the pruning we take and we make biochar in a specially adapted steel drum. So what about the biochar? The biochar is a proven refuge for microorganisms. To make this business work, to duplicate what's going on in the forest, and for the mulch to work, there have to be microorganisms to break it down, convert it into food for the plants. So biochar is something that charcoal improving soil has been well documented in the Amazon. There's a video called El Dorado that talks about tierra preta, and it's very it's a very powerful video. So people come and they ask, how do I convert my soil into tierra preta? If you ask about tierra preta and biochar and how much do you need to make your soil, nobody really knows this, but we figure that at the minimum you probably need 1 kilo per square meter of land space to start creating tierra preta. Well, so for 1 hectare, 10,000 square meters, you need 10 tons. Well, so that's pretty intimidating, and people are overwhelmed and say, well, forget that. What we do, we're not that easily intimidated. And so when we plant a tree like this one here, we plant it with some biochar. We put the biochar around, maybe about this far out from the stem. And then we come back a few months later and the tree is growing, and we put another band of biochar around. And we keep doing that, so it's a little by little, and we can afford that. And the biochar, before we know it, the biochar from this chico zapote is reaching the biochar from this carambola and that mame zapote there, and we've covered the area.
And so you're essentially improving the fertility by giving this surface area to hold that fertility, yeah, and it doesn't wash away like topsoil does when the rains come. Yeah, it holds it for a longer period of time.
It works in a lot of different ways, and it's not completely understood how, but it does stay there, and it doesn't need to. You don't have to keep applying more in the same place like you do with calcium carbonate and some other amendments. In the Amazon, where there's so much of this terra preta, and it's so good that people even mine it to take and sell it as a potting medium, and it seems to keep reproducing itself. That charcoal was put there 1,000 years ago. They know that people did it because in there are also pottery shards. So there's pottery shards and charcoal and wonderful black soil, tierra preta.
Beautiful.
So we're not putting the pottery shards, but we're producing a charcoal that is, it's a very different system than what's traditional with charcoal. This charcoal is produced at a very high temperature of at least 800 degrees centigrade. It's so hot that there's no smoke in the process. If you've seen traditional charcoal production, it's a smelly process that goes on for 3, 4, 5 days with a smoke that's always coming up and not very nice. This one is quick, and there's no smoke. There's a secondary burn. The charcoal is lighter than the charcoal that you would buy for a barbecue. A cubic centimeter of this charcoal is said to have the surface area of a football field.
It's a lot of space,
Yeah.
which makes 10,000 kilos, you said? Kind of intimidating, even more so,
yeah.
huh?
Yeah.
So, Peter, all of this biochar that you have going around, you don't just sprinkle it on, you do something to prepare it, yeah, to load it with fertility, right?
Right. So what we're doing is we take the biochar out of the steel drum and we put it into a container. We use these plastic drums, and then we'll put an EM or MM mixture in there,
Which is effective microorganisms,
yeah,
or
efficient
mountain
microorganisms,
mountain,
or mountain
microorganisms. Or?
Yeah, I mean, you can do any sort of thing like that.
Just because people, maybe not everybody watching knows
Right.
exactly what EMs or MMs are. I was just kind of
Okay.
getting clear about it. And then MMs are the microorganisms that you get off like the forest floor.
Homemade microorganisms, as opposed to a microorganism culture that's made in a laboratory.
Which is what EMs would be.
Right.
Okay, great.
So, the microorganism culture is in water with molasses. The microorganisms are activated with molasses, and we'll put gallons of this stuff in there, and for maybe 4 days, 5 days, and the charcoal soaks it up. So what was light charcoal is now really heavy charcoal. Then we take that and we apply it around. The idea, we're totally convinced by microorganisms, and if we went in the forest and the forest is covered with a lot of leaves, something like what's over there. We move those leaves aside, we're going to see microorganisms, mycorrhizae, many different things working on breaking down those leaves.
Sure.
And we're also likely to see root tips from the trees feeding there, where the organic material is making contact with the clay. And so anyway, the idea is that kind of a trinity. We need, this isn't any good without the natural mulch material, the
Right.
biomass. So we've got biomass, we've got the microorganisms to break down the biomass, and we've got the charcoal, which is, in this case, a refuge for the microorganisms. We can bring microorganisms and apply them, spray them directly on the biomass. That works, but you know, depending on the weather and a bunch of other things, there's going to be some level of failure and attrition in those with those microorganisms. If they come with already in the charcoal, then they've got a good place for them that they're living, and then from there they can venture out and eat and return if it's too dry or whatever. So that's just one thing that the charcoal does, but that's an important thing for us with our with the microorganisms and breaking down, converting biomass into food for plants.
Yeah, no, it sounds incredibly important. I mean, we've been experimenting with some biochar at our place, haven't really dialed in our production style yet, but definitely, like I've heard that in the rainforest, the fertility is not really in the soil. The fertility is in the canopy, yeah, the trees, like and like you're talking about the roots coming up and feeding off of all of that freshly composted leaves from the microorganisms. It makes a lot of sense, especially thinking about a lot of the trees here also have shallow root systems because they're just getting that first feed, and down deep there's just a whole bunch more clay, yeah? So by adding the charcoal, you're increasing the fertility of something that naturally just wouldn't even be fertile. Even if it was a forest, even as a covered forest, it's still doesn't have the same kind of layering and layering and layering of topsoil like something in the temperate climates, yeah? So this is something that nature wouldn't necessarily do on its own in a regular cycle. So this is really kind of an innovation to land management that's going to go a long way, yeah?
The thing is in the forest, this works fine for a lot of reasons, and the forest is a big place, and so you don't need to be adding microorganisms or anything else there, ideally. Here's a durian tree, and this tree produced probably almost 200 kilos of 150 kilos of durian for us. So this is something that in nature would just fall on the ground, rot there, and feed the tree back. But we're not doing that.
Right.
We're taking these durians and we're taking them and we're eating them and we're selling them and everything. So we need to put something back.
Perfect.
All right, well, I think, wow, I am just mystified. We can go on and on of what we've seen here at the farm, but we might leave that for another visit and program. In the meantime, make sure to visit sharinginsights.net, or you can find the link in the video here. And we have another video of Peter talking about his nursery. We've got a great podcast coming up where we'll be talking about using one's land to cultivate both food and plants to grow and sell in the farmer's market and other local focused cottage industries. So be sure to check that out too. Peter, thank you so much. Your place is amazing. You are a gift to really not only the land here, but the country. I've heard your name come up so many times as I did this podcast. Everyone telling me, well, make sure you talk to Peter Cring. And so I just thank you so much for taking the time to show us around.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to show people around that are into the plants and stuff. And so we always have a good time with that. And, yeah, I'm glad you appreciate it. We have a good time here for sure.